This is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Faulk. Thanks for joining us. We are literally at the point where words begin to fail us, when the scope of our national disease and dysfunction overcomes our ability to describe these circumstances with enough heft to accurately reflect the breadth of the crises. The U.S. Capitol building was sacked by a right-wing mob, with members of Congress from both houses and political parties hiding behind seats, fogging up the plastic hoods meant to protect them from chemical attack. Our own Congressman Jared Huffman was in his office awaiting his turn to vote on approving the electoral vote tally that ultimately would seat Joseph R. Biden into the U.S. presidency. We speak with Huffman in a moment. An interview conducted mere hours after the siege ended and the vote to seal Biden's victory was held. An Arizona woman, an Air Force veteran, was shot and killed while trying to breach the tall wooden doors that open onto the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives. Others died Wednesday of medical emergencies, and on Thursday, a Capitol police officer succumbed to injuries suffered while defending the heart of American democracy. Meanwhile, our collective suffering due to COVID-19 continues to accelerate. On Thursday, more than 4,000 people died on that one day, the largest number of daily deaths to date. On Friday, breaking another dark record, 300,000 new cases were diagnosed. Health officials have begun local vaccine distribution, with hospitals primarily using the Pfizer vaccine because of its strenuous storage requirements, and rural clinics dispensing the Moderna vaccine. Yet we remain in the early stages on that effort. So far, in the district of 6 counties that includes Humboldt, more than 150,000 vaccines have been delivered. In Phase 1A, the one we're in, officials are focusing on frontline healthcare workers and residents of long-term healthcare facilities. Phase 1B will include people aged 75 or older, as well as those at risk of occupational exposure in the fields of education, childcare, emergency services, and agriculture. A plan on that phase for Humboldt County is expected next week. So we're caught in a maelstrom. Chaos surrounds us seemingly on all sides. Efforts to track down and punish the rampaging crew responsible for Wednesday's violence have begun in earnest as a bipartisan collection of legislators brainstorm ways to either hem this president in or remove him from office. There is no glib response that can make these terrors subside. Yet there are signs that things may be improving. President-elect Biden says help is on the way, and so we have to trust that he means what he says. Some relief money has arrived in Humboldt County bank accounts, the $600 per person stimulus approved just a couple weeks ago. And finally, we must all recognize that despite the horrific assault we witnessed this week, our democracy has so far survived a relatively close call with violent insurrection. Whether our society can use these quakes and tremors to ultimately grow stronger, that may well be the challenge of our times. Now the interview. As violence engulfed the Capitol building Wednesday, I messaged Congressman Jared Huffman's staff to wish them well and offer my prayers. I was told that his staff has been working from home, and so we're mostly clear of the chaos. At that moment, however, Huffman himself was barricaded in his office, waiting for the storm to pass. The next morning, his eyes bloodshot from a long night legislating after the rioters had been cleared, we met for a few minutes on Zoom to discuss what had happened and what it all means for our republic.
Well, there's no other way to describe it. This was a violent insurrection that stormed the Capitol at the encouragement of the President of the United States, among others. It had been building up for several days. It took some violent turns that I think many of us were hoping could be avoided, but they did crash through barriers and breach the Capitol. Really defiled the Capitol over a period of several hours, and it was quite a surreal experience.
To some extent, I mean, watching it from afar, obviously on TV, it was horrifying to watch. I imagine being there was infinitely worse. But in some sense, it was almost like this was the moment I knew was coming. That there had been all this time spent riling up people and lying to them about the outcome of the election and stuff, and that for once I was like, well, maybe now people will take it seriously.
Well, I would agree. Yeah, it was simultaneously shocking and surreal, and yet at the same time, everything that we've seen coming for so long.
Yeah. I heard your interview on JPR, and there was you were talking about hoping that Donald Trump would be convicted or basically charged with sedition. Given the realities that we live in politically, how realistic is that, and how would you see that moving forward if it were to happen?
Well, it's not as simple as a member of Congress, charging a president with a crime. It doesn't work that way. And, often my followers on social media and elsewhere will just say, do something, charge him with a crime. It's not that simple. A federal crime requires a federal law enforcement official to investigate and charge the crime. And as we know, this Justice Department believes you can't do that to a sitting president. So I think what needs to happen is when President Trump leaves office in 2 weeks, the new Justice Department, probably led by Merrick Garland, needs to take a good independent look at the crimes that have been committed by this man. They need to do it without fear or favor. We are not a country that simply retaliates against political opponents. And so, there must be a measure of apolitical motivation, professionalism to this, but nobody gets a pass. And if anything, what we've seen in the last 24 hours is that Donald Trump has just blown through any lines of deference that would ordinarily be owed a former president of the United States.
Yeah. So where were you physically at when all this occurred? You had to lock down at some point, I heard. Yeah. So where were you at? And then did you feel safe?
So most of us were not in the gallery or on the floor of the House. There were just a very limited number of people allowed to be there because of COVID restrictions. And so we were kind of platooning. When our group was called to cast votes, we would come down and then we were asked to immediately leave. So most of us were not on the floor or in the gallery, and we were in our offices. We also had sort of seen trouble coming with this group and this day that Trump had built into, such a big day for his following. And so many of us asked staff not to come in, and we were all alone in our offices, and that's where I was.
Yeah. You mentioned that you'd all seen this coming. It seemed like Capitol Police would have been more prepared. And obviously we don't have insight. I don't have insight into their preparations and their numbers and stuff, but it seemed like Trump spoke, he sent them down the road, they came down the road, and they pretty much got in the building, in 10 or 15 minutes after they got there. Do you think that they should have been more prepared? And
yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, clearly they should have been more prepared, and we need to ask some really hard and uncomfortable questions. Look, I love Capitol Police. They do a great job. Even yesterday, we saw plenty of heroism and great bravery from them overall.
Yeah.
But we've got to ask whether there were individual elements within some of these police forces that were sympathetic to these insurrectionists, whether they might have even directly or indirectly aided them. You can't avoid that awkward question when you've got a group of folks like this with baseball bats and helmets that succeed in crashing through this fortress and occupying the capital of the United States. You just can't avoid those hard questions.
Yeah, my feelings, and I was talking with my wife, and we were wondering if some of the GOP members who are sympathetic to the movement may have had some offered some access or something at some point, but that's obviously just conjecture.
I don't know. I have no reason to believe that. I do know that many of these Republicans who now say they were horrified and appalled were actually out speaking to this mob and cheering them on. So there's a lot of accountability needed, and it includes some of my colleagues in Congress, certainly includes anyone who was among the perpetrators yesterday. It includes the response by Capitol Police, and that accountability needs to go right down Pennsylvania Avenue to President Trump himself.
Yeah, I'd heard that there was some scuffling on the House floor earlier today between members about this, and obviously you guys were up late. You were trying to get the electoral votes approved, and then you broke because of all this. And when you came back together, there were still people who were objecting to the electoral votes. Can you describe what the mood was like during those proceedings and how you felt watching those people continue on with the conspiracy theory?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about scuffling or whether there was anything physical, but obviously there's a punchiness and a rather combustible feeling right now among those of us who saw our country almost become a 10-pot dictatorship And we think some of our colleagues are complicit in that. And we think many of them are glossing over it and continuing to do the very thing that sets some of this in motion. So yeah, that becomes pretty passionate when you're dealing with a set of facts like that, and when you're on the floor of the House with people who continue to think that way. It's reckless, it's un-American, it's despicable. And for them to fake outrage when we call out their lies and some of the other things that they said that were part of that that colorful exchange last night, well, you know, the American people, I think, have gotten a real clear look at who's who in this situation.
Yeah. What do you make of the argument made by Josh Hawley and others about that the violence is not the same thing as the objections, and that the objections are the legal mode of addressing their concerns about the election?
Yeah. Well, that's what you say when you're trying to cover your ass after having been part of, setting this entire debacle in motion. So yeah, that's the best that Hawley and Cruz and others can do when we all know that they're culpable in this. They bear some responsibility for what happened yesterday.
So how do you think that seeing this, I mean, Zimbabwe, which issued a statement, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but they basically said that the United States can no longer enforce, democracy or push the proper behavior on people because they can't control their own selves. How do you think that this impacts our image internationally, and how do we go about getting that back or burnishing it, improving it?
Yeah, well, it certainly doesn't help, but I guess what I would say, first of all, to the Josh Hawleys and Ted Cruzes of the world, I would make sure that they know that they own that, that the bad actors around the world are going to use what they set in motion to continue to do bad things. And, these are politicians who pretend to care about democracy in other countries. So I just can't say enough about how despicable and disingenuous and seditionist I think they have conducted themselves. But I would also say to anyone who wants to cite this as some sort of disqualifier for the United States of America as a beacon of democracy, I'm not proud at all of what happened yesterday, except for this. Within hours of clearing this mob, we finished the job of largely completing the peaceful transfer of power. Our democratic process has held. We are going to inaugurate Joe Biden and Kamala Harris a few days from now. So judge us by that, not by the ugly way we got there this time.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw Chad Wolf his nomination has been revoked as the Homeland Security Director. And there's been some talk about the 25th Amendment, that members of the cabinet are whispering about it, and that Pence, who was reportedly irate at what happened yesterday, maybe thinking in that direction. Do you think that with 2 weeks left, it's worth it to remove Trump? And if you don't remove him, how do we begin to control him so he doesn't do anything even more destructive?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack in that.
Sorry.
I'm seeing a ton of resignations unfolding, including some who say that yesterday was some sort of crucible. They've seen enough. They got to get out. I wish some of these folks, including people within the National Security Administration, would simply use the 25th Amendment trigger that's there for them to implement from the inside in situations like this. So bailing out, I think, is a bit cowardly at this point. Far better that they stand in and be part of the 25th Amendment trigger. But I realize also that the cabinet is now almost entirely populated with sycophants and political stooges. So anyone who is holding their breath for Mike Pence to stand up and show a spine is probably going to be holding their breath for a really long time. And so I'll certainly join the call for the 25th Amendment. I will hope that something about yesterday infused Mike Pence with a spine and a proper conscience, but I doubt that will happen. So I'll pursue impeachment. We won't be able to complete that, and certainly not a Senate trial before Donald Trump leaves office, but we need to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is one effect of impeachment, even if it's after a president leaves office, it prevents them from ever becoming president again.
So even when he's gone, you would want to see that move forward.
Yeah.
Is that right? Excellent. So obviously, there's a couple things that we have gotten lost in all this. I'm almost done. We're out of time pretty much. But the Democrats won the Senate.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be an entirely democratically controlled government. First off, what do you think we can expect to see there? And moving forward, I'm sure that'll help with your side's, trying to heal the divides that we've been in. And then Facebook and Twitter banned Donald Trump. Do you see them being brought in to sort of answer for some of the things that have gone on?
Undoubtedly, yes, they will need to answer. And having crossed that threshold now into taking some responsibility for the content of their platforms and the way they've been exploited for bad things, I think there's no going back.
Not incidentally, after the Democrats seized the Senate.
How about that? What a coincidence.
Yeah.
What a coincidence. Yeah. So I think we won't go backward. We're going to keep moving down the road of putting some structure to the accountability of these social media platforms. I don't know what that's going to look like, but clearly there's more to come on that. In terms of what it means to have this democratically controlled Senate, I am under no illusions that I will probably be frustrated by the disproportionate power that a handful of senators will wield, including Joe Manchin, who will probably frustrate me on some aspects of climate and other issues. But I will take it, because what it means is there's going to be a Democratic gavel in charge of every committee and subcommittee in the Senate. It means that the floor of the Senate is open for business, and it means that President Biden will be able to confirm cabinet appointees, other political appointees, and judges. So that's a sea change. This means we can actually get to work repairing and governing this nation.
Yeah. Is there any message you want to send to your constituents about what they saw? Is there any last word that you want to reassure them with, or anything like that?
Well, democracy held. It was ugly. It was a really dark day. I feel honored to represent them in the arena, even in the midst of all of this ugliness and chaos. And I think as appalled as all of us should feel by what happened, we should also at least feel some sense of reassurance and pride in the resiliency and the fact that we're still standing.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time out, Jared.
Thanks, James.
And hopefully we'll see better times.
Amen. Take care.
See you later.
Huffman's office will hold a town hall meeting next Tuesday at 4 p.m. to discuss the assault on the Capitol. To watch and participate, go to Huffman's Facebook page. We'll be right back after this short break. Oh, I'm sorry, my bad, miscommunication on my part. The crew didn't do that. That was all me. Humboldt County Public Health Officer Ian Hoffman addressed the media this week about the county's ongoing efforts to deliver the COVID-19 vaccine as efficiently as possible.
So we're currently in phase 1A still, which is about 10,000 people in Humboldt County. And that is being done by invitation only, as I've mentioned, through large hospital systems or through clinical networks. And we are now working on getting in folks who are not part of a bigger hospital system through multiple avenues over the course of the next week. There's no cost of the vaccine. The vaccine is being provided for free. Insurances can be billed and ask for reimbursement for it if someone has insurance, but you cannot charge someone if they have no insurance. Going forward, phase 1B is going to be a much larger group and a much more diverse group of folks, so that might look different. We're working those details out this week and hope to have a plan in the coming week or two to release to the public how phase 1B will be started.
Hoffman said their main hurdle had to do with supply. The county will upscale its efforts and deliver more shots when they receive more doses.
The big question, I mean, we do hope that this vaccine campaign will allow us to get back to normal life, and what that looks like and sort of what how that comes down is still a big question. right now we're getting about 1,000 to 2,000 vaccines a week in Humboldt County. So as I mentioned, we have about 10,000 phase 1A folks to get through. So you can do that math pretty easily. It's going to take a little while. If we were getting 5 to 6 times that amount, we could easily build up enough infrastructure in Humboldt County to vaccinate more people and potentially get through the entire population throughout the rest of this year. So it's really a supply issue. It's not a delivery issue. We will build a bigger delivery system if more supply comes to us.
The suggestion by some that health officials should focus on delivering first-round shots to more people rather than the 2-shot recommendation for full immunity, Hoffman said the county will follow the science.
I do not agree with that method, and we will continue to follow a 2-dose recommendation here in Humboldt County, as well as in California. There is strong evidence to support that approach, and until there's evidence to support otherwise or recommendations, I would not recommend we change that locally.
As all U.S. states struggle to deploy the vaccine as efficiently and effectively as possible, Governor Gavin Newsom today addressed several related issues. Newsom described the state's role in that process. Although the state does not deliver the actual injections, he said the buck stops with him.
I think there's a sense that the governors have somehow received vaccines, and then the governors decide where the vaccines go. The state of California has not received 1 dose of vaccines. The state didn't receive any. The state was a conduit through these advisory committees of where the vaccines go. And it goes to local partners well established. I'll remind folks who may not be familiar, every year the state of California distributes roughly 19 million doses of the flu vaccine. We have a well-established criteria for distribution. Only 10% of those vaccines are actually administered through the county, 90% through a network of providers. So it's through that network of providers that we're looking to distribute the vaccine. Now, this is a state that's larger than 21 states combined. I wish in many respects I, was just managing a small city. The challenge is how one holds accountable all these levers and all these levels of government. But at the end of the day, Governor takes responsibility for whatever anyone wants to put on his or her plate, and I happily accept it.
Newsom said that local jurisdictions have some flexibility when it comes to vaccine distribution, but people who flagrantly violate the state's guidelines will be prosecuted.
We want to provide more flexibility, more discretion, but within these broader parameters. We are going after, as it relates to enforcement, because I know there's been discussion for it, if people are monetizing vaccines, vaccines cost nothing. None of you will pay a penny for vaccines. You should not. Someone's charging, they shouldn't be charging. If someone's somehow monetizing the vaccines, or people, some well-known, very rich person that's young and in great health, and, she and he, the rest of their family, 50 folks, and want to have a big party, and they're all going to get a vaccination party, a flagrant violation by a private, we want to go after that. But people using common sense and saying, I'm low on my dose, we're running out. I'm low, not on my dose. I have about extra 3 or 4 doses in this vial, and there's no one that showed up in line, or this person decided last minute not to take it. And then there's this, 64-year-old senior who's there saying, well, by definition, we want to allow that flexibility. So common sense. Go after the flagrant, support common sense, and now formally, to your question, providing more flexibility between these phases.
Eureka Mayor Susan Seaman this week decried the violence in Washington, D.C. and its impact on our democracy. She then went on to offer up several ways that the city is working to help its constituents stay afloat during these lean times.
Our local businesses had a strong holiday season thanks to those of you who really treated holiday shopping like a community service and focused on keeping your dollars local. We know that this month we're entering the most difficult time of year for local businesses, and it's made especially hard in the face of COVID-19. The City of Eureka set aside $300,000 to provide grants of up to $7,500 to small businesses located within the City of Eureka limits to cover business owners' unpaid or pending rent from January 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2021. If you're a local business, learn more at the City of Eureka website at ci.eureka.ca.gov. Another grant opportunity for local businesses that we don't want you to miss is the California Small Business Relief Grant Program, which will provide $500 million for eligible small business owners and nonprofits who have been impacted by COVID-19 health and safety restrictions. Grants of up to $25,000 each will be given to eligible small businesses and nonprofits to help cover expenses during the pandemic. Grant applications are due on January 13th, which is just around the corner. To learn more and to see an application, visit careliefgrant.com. In more positive news on the business front, Dick Taylor Craft Chocolates has officially announced that they'll be restoring the old co-op building on the waterfront for their chocolate factory. If you're familiar with the company, you probably know that they put exquisite craftsmanship into every part of their business, from the chocolate to the packaging to their facilities, and we can expect a beautiful new addition to Old Town when they're done. Congratulations, Adam and Dustin. Finally, this week the City Council, Planning Commission, and Economic Development Commission met together for a joint workshop to discuss opportunities around broadband. With the new Trans-Pacific fiber optic line, we were encouraged to dream big about providing connectivity to our residents and more economic development opportunities for the region.
That's all the time we have for now. Thanks for joining us. So far, Humboldt County has had 2,031 positive COVID cases. It's also had 23 deaths. We remain in the red or substantial risk tier for the time being, and our collective positivity rate is 5.2%. I would also mention that yesterday we hit the milestone of 4,000 deaths in one day and also 300,000 new cases in a single day. So those are our milestones I wish we'd never meet. So anyway, stay tuned, stay informed. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.